Hello, everybody. This is Luna calling out to all of us getting things checked off our to-do list, occupying the body to liberate the mind. This week we have Katherine Everitt. Katherine is a philosopher based in Brooklyn doing work on Hegel and Badiou. Absolutely lovely to have you here.
Thank you both so much. Such an honor and a privilege to be here. I'm so excited to talk about this meditation in Descartes. I think we have some of the most interesting themes here. Nothingness, infinity, truth, and error. I'm really excited. Yeah, everything is literally everything is here.
As we do every week, my name's Val.
I'm Ol.
And I suppose, Ol, you left us off with this kind of grand summary of the situation last week, right?
That's right.
We're left in this universe, and all there is thinking substance, me, I think, therefore I am, this minimal unit, this finite being, and God, this infinite, perfect, actual thing. And you said, you posed Nala and I the question, is this the kind of universe that you want to be living in?
Well, it's a pretty worrying universe, I find. I mean, here's little Descartes. He's alone, but suddenly he's discovered a friend in his private universe, but it's a very strange friend.
A very odd kind of chap.
Yeah, it's as James Joyce puts it, nobody. It's like the big daddy who you can't talk to, so he's kind of nobody, but you're completely dependent upon him. He created you, he's the author of your being, and that's the only other person that you've got in your little universe.
Yeah, and so what he's going to be trying to do in this, because this is where we're up to now, we're on meditation 4, is, okay, so all we have is me, Big Daddy God. We need to find out a way of getting back the rest of the universe, the rest of everything in existence that Descartes has just called into doubt, has doubted away. He's going to start giving us back what this is. And I suppose this kind of leads us, continuing this recap, into this question of authorship, right? So God is the creator of me. I can't be the creator of myself, right?
That's right.
I can't create myself because if I had created myself, I would have made myself perfect. As we established last week, I mean, I'm already perfect. And then it goes through the different kind of other kinds of causes, right? Are my parents the cause of me, et cetera, et cetera? Am I the result of partial causes, right? But because we have Katherine here this week, I wanted to kind of interrogate this question of authorship and AI, right? What happens when we as finite beings create another finite being that is AI, right?
Yeah, it's a fascinating question in terms of creating imperfection. I think one of the fundamental ways to understand the difference between what AI is doing and what us humans are doing, if we read this with Descartes, is that, for Descartes, we start at a complete ground zero in terms of reason, in terms of thought, right? We hollow everything out from our thinking. AI starts with the exact opposite ground. It starts by harvesting all knowledge that it can acquire in the world. So we have a completely different ground in this way, just to think about this this movement from presuppositionless thought to put a Hegelian spin on it, and then a position of just regurgitation of information.
So I think it's like the opposite of Descartes' procedure in a way, because like AI starts out by saying it's all good, like whatever data or information is out there, we're going to scrape it.
Exactly, right? It believes everything it reads online and then rearranges these words in such a way, right? Completely contrary to how Descartes is instructing us to develop reason.
Exactly. It's like the subject of pure affirmation, the pure affirmation of continually affirming more and more and more knowledge. There's no doubt. There seems to be just no doubt that AI is capable of doing it. It's the subject that doesn't say, I don't know.
Exactly. I think a really simple way we can put it is that reason is not regurgitation.
Well, there's a major difference, that happened, like this kind of event that happened in the middle of the history of philosophy in between Descartes and the invention of AI. And the name of this event is David Hume. And what does David Hume do? He basically invents and justifies statistical reasoning. So what AI, imagine an AI is like in the room with us, probably is, 'cause my phone's on,
Yeah.
right?
Our
Probably is
computers are
here
here.
with us, right? An AI would say, come on, I'm based on induction. I'm just generalizing. If there are patterns out there in the information that you humans have put on the web, it's not my fault that some of the information you put is false. I'm just generating patterns out of them.
Yeah,
Right.
I'm using the information that you gave me. I'm trained on the information that you supplied me. If I make mistakes, you as author are to blame, right?
Completely. And I think this highlights another really important difference, right? Is that for us humans, we can step outside of the knowledge that we've been given. We can examine from an external perspective, right? We can alienate ourselves and from the knowledge that we've been given. This is an impossibility for AI, right? Like
Yeah.
you were just saying, I'm just regurgitating what you've already told me, right? But there's no ability to then reflect upon that knowledge.
Well, there's absolutely. There's no reflexivity, and I think you're very right to point this out, because what we do get in Descartes is a continual dramatization of the gap in between the subject and its knowledge. So he incarnates that gap through the actual procedure of doubt, the radical doubts, and he continually reenacts it all the way through this fourth meditation by saying, I continually make mistakes. I know they're mistakes. How did I make the mistake? Who's at fault for me making a mistake? When is it that I actually get things right? And so we continually have this separation in between little Descartes, the big daddy up there in the sky who authored him, right? And all this knowledge out there, these ideas that are coming through his head, some of which are wrong. So this separation is there all the time.
Yeah, and it's particularly like the great example for this is when you ask, for example, ChatGPT a question and it makes a mistake, it waits until you have told it it waits until you have told it that it has made a mistake, right? And then it goes,
It's your fault, Val. You're the trainer. You're the teacher of AI. You didn't train it right. You didn't give it the right prompts.
I'm a bad father. I'm a bad father.
You need to have
AI.
lessons. You need to have lessons on how to give AI prompts.
I need to spend more time with my AI.
That's right. It's lonely.
But also in a very simple way, right? AI can't believe in God, right? AI can't be bound in this way that we can be bound to a big other, to, a guarantor of our knowledge, right? This is just an impossibility for it because it does require some degree of self-alienation.
Yeah.
Well, AI has no desire to a certain extent. It's like existing in a world of demand, of prompts, of instructions, and I think, this is also great because for me, as soon as we start talking about AI and we talk about AI making mistakes, we're in a blame game, right?
Oh, 100%.
Who's to blame? Is it the AI? Is it us for being so naive as to use AI in the first place?
Yeah.
This is the kind of thing I get into with my students with regard to AI. I get into a blame game with them as well. And again, what is it about? It's about authorship.
Yeah.
My students refuse to become authors and say, I'll just use AI instead.
Yeah.
And then I say, that's not what you're supposed to be doing in university. Here's an F. Do you like the F? Are you going to use AI again? Write that. And then they say, well, I'm going to be using AI in my work life. Why wouldn't I use it in AI here? So we get into a blame game.
Yeah, and this is exactly this kind of one of these problems of authorship, right? And exactly this is something that students, they suppose that AI has the answers to what their question is. They'll go, okay, if I just feed it in the prompt that the professor gave me, maybe I can give it some of the text, AI will be able to generate an answer for me, and that'll be great. But, a number of times students have come in and said, oh, this is the structure of my essay. I used AI to generate it. And I say, well, what's this concept here in this? You're talking to me about Diotima's ladder in the symposium. We didn't do that. Have you read it? Do you understand what that is? And they say, no. And I said, well, do you think that's a good thing to include in your essay then? A concept that you don't understand? And they said, but it's a good essay because, AI told me it was a good essay. And I'm like, yeah, but you don't know what that means. Right, so it's this deferral. It does become this interesting blame game of who is at fault for the source of this error? AI is perfectly within its rights to say, all of my faults, I'm merely reflecting from you. I inherited this knowledge from you, and as we've seen over the course of these past episodes, Descartes is constantly calling into question the sources of his knowledge. He goes, all right, I got all these ideas from the university. Turns out they were all rubbish or based on Aristotelian empiricism, etc., etc. I got a bunch of ideas from my parents, but they were also, the sources of errors that I have made. There's just this kind of, this blame game of authorship. Who's at fault, it's two finite beings suffering from their finitude, but I suppose AI actually, maintains itself as this infinity, this infinite wealth of knowledge, right?
Well, he's got a very, very particular problem at the beginning of Meditation 4. He basically, the challenge is he's got to repopulate the universe.
Yes.
Right? And the way he puts this is he says, right, I've got a couple of innate ideas. I've got the idea of myself as a thinking thing. I've got the idea of substance.
Yep.
I now know that I've got a pretty clear idea of God as a perfect being and
Yep.
as the author of my being. How do I attain knowledge of other things? And I just want to say, Val, were you around in the 70s?
I unfortunately had not come into being in the 70s.
Catherine, were you around in the 70s?
Not quite yet.
Okay, so for those of our listeners who were around in the 70s, one of the great philosophers was called Doctor Who,
Oh, yes.
famous
Good
science
doctor.
fiction. And Doctor Who used to pull a trick that is very important to Descartes right now. He used to pull something larger out of something smaller, right? So as I've said before, it's like inverted Matryoshka dolls. Basically, you're stuck inside a tiny doll, right, which is the TARDIS for all you Doctor Who freaks out there, the spaceship which looked like a police box, telephone box kind of thing from London. And then you open the door, you go inside the TARDIS, and it's bigger on the inside.
It's enormous. Yeah,
That's
it's got
right.
a whole command center on the inside. It's got all sorts of different rooms. The inside is far larger than the outside.
So how do you pull that trick? How do you get something larger from being inside something tiny?
Yeah.
So that's his challenge. And he's got two basic things. And I'd like to get your take on these two moves he makes. First of all, he says, God is not a deceiver.
No.
Why is he not a deceiver?
Well, because deception would be an imperfection in Descartes' view, right? To deceive is a sign of some kind of defect, and of course, a perfect actual being cannot be defectuous, cannot have any defects. Otherwise, it wouldn't be perfect.
Well, just, the classic Lacanian point, right? Nothing would make any sense, neither knowledge nor existence, if we didn't have some sort of big other to hold everything together, to be the guarantor of, not just truth, not just knowledge, but our very being itself. And so we need this perfect God. I mean, there's a simple point, right? That the bad genie exists for Descartes only to disappear, right? Only to be negated, right? To be shoved to the side in order for that perfection of God to hold everything together.
Well, I suspect that bad genius, that evil demon, is going to make a reappearance in this meditation later on. So
It's gonna.
stay tuned.
He was cast away, only to be brought back in.
Yeah. Second move.
Yeah.
God is the author of all of my faculties.
Yes. But this immediately poses a problem, right? If God is the author of all of my faculties, and I'm still prone to mistakes, why would God create me as less perfect and prone to mistakes, right? Isn't that just one of these kind of fundamental problems of authorship?
Well, he's a bad craftsman. It's that simple. He didn't do a good job. He botched it.
Are you trying to imply that God is not perfect here? Oh, this is a
Bad God.
very
Bad creator.
this is a very anti-Cartesian move that you're doing, right? But this is one of the questions that Descartes exactly poses himself. He goes, okay, well, God has created me. Why would God create me with all of these imperfections? Why am I still prone to error then if God is good and wouldn't deceive me? Nevertheless, my Father has made me defectuous.
Well, I think, this is one of those moments where philosophy becomes extremely useful for everybody out there because, what philosophers do, one of the traditional and classic gestures of philosophers is to call bullshit, right? And so what's he going to do now? He's going to develop a whole theory of bullshit, a whole theory of error. Like, what is a mistake? What are we doing when we fall into error? How many people out there are making errors all the time without knowing it? The philosopher's going to tell you.
Yeah, exactly. And I mean, to go back to AI just very briefly, one of the things we accuse AI for is being the source of this error, of errors and things like that. It hallucinates knowledge all the time. But then I feel a little bit embarrassed because I make up stuff all the time when I don't know. I feel like I've been trying to find this passage in Lacan's Seminar 20 where he's talking about Descartes' subject, etc., etc. And I keep going through it and I'm like, I feel like I've just made this up. And I've tried to pass it off as knowledge, But this is, again, one of the questions that Descartes is going to be looking at in this meditation is where's the source of this error coming from? You know, because it seems like if Big Daddy God is all perfect and all good, the errors can't be coming from him.
He's got to save God, right? Because he's not a particularly orthodox kind of Christian, but he's very, very prudent, and so he is going to save God. For me, this meditation is I'm going to save God meditation, right? God
needs saving from the image I've created of him.
Exactly, yeah.
Yeah, well, I mean, this is one of the recurring questions we've had over this podcast. What kind of Christian is Descartes? And this is where I think he is, really coming home with his Catholicism's coming through. It's like, there's the good God, original sin is the fault of humanity, and I must redeem myself in God's eyes. And this is exactly what Descartes is going to be trying to do. God can't be the source of error, because if God was the cause of error, then God wouldn't be perfect, right? And this is a very naughty move, if I understand correctly.
It kind of reminds me of kettle logic, because he's got so many different overlapping answers to why God is not to blame, right? And one of we all know this, so think about this, dear listeners, as a blame game, and think about your own classic responses when somebody accuses you of something. And one of your responses is, well, nothing happened in the first place. So not only did I not do it, but nothing happened in the first place. And so Descartes pulls this one out, because he says, look, I've got another innate idea. Hey, presto, in my head, guess what? Not just substance, but nothingness.
Now we're working with three innate ideas, aren't we lucky?
That's right. And then he says, okay, I've got nothingness. So I've got a whole scale of degrees of being.
Yeah.
I've got nothingness, and then I've got all the degrees of being all the way up to the maximum, which is God, right? And then he says, now I know what it is to make a mistake. When I make a mistake, I am participating in nothingness.
Yeah.
Right?
This is one of the most interesting parts of this meditation. I think the discussion of nothingness, because, like you just said, Oliver, the nothingness is false to Descartes. So we have to inquire, well, what does that mean? How is the nothingness false for him? Why is that the ground of falsehood? And it strikes me, and I don't know what y'all think about this, that, it's very classic paradox of philosophy to affirm the nothing, to say the nothing is. It's a very classic paradox. How could the nothing be? As soon as we name it, we've substantialized that which ought to be, well,
absolutely,
nothingness. And so we start with this paradox, but, it strikes me that we can't, or, one ought to really consider this nothingness that I find within myself, right? Not outside myself, but within myself. This and the previous moves he makes in terms of emptying out myself of all thoughts, right? Is that the nothingness he identifies, that when I've doubted to the point that I'm left with no thoughts, is that ground of my being, of my subjectivity, is that also not grounded in this paradox of affirming nothingness in some way? Are these things wrapped up? I don't know, but I think there's definitely some interesting connection between this movement of utter evacuation and then an affirmation of the nothing.
Yeah.
Well, he is absolutely voiding his universe in a certain sense, he's emptying it out. He's more or less all emptied out. Yeah. And at this point, he wants to fill it up again. And paradoxically, in order to fill it up again, he's just seized upon the nothingness that is in his empty universe.
Yeah. I love that kind of paradoxical move. Exactly. It's I'm trying to get back, everything in existence. And what's the third innate idea I'm going to introduce? It's nothingness, right? And, since we're in Paris, and for those of us who have had the joy and delight of going on a walk down Boulevard Saint-Germain, there was a certain French philosopher big in the 20th century who made much ado about this relationship between being and nothingness. A certain Jean-Paul Sartre, poor, here I am stuck in the middle with you between being and nothingness. Here I am, this poor little substance mediating between the three, So
he wasn't stuck in the middle. He was stuck in the Café Domago, drinking a Pernod and just watching all those people lining up on the bus stop.
Yeah, taking a tremendous amount of methamphetamine, going and giving his classes in the morning, really burning the midnight candle.
So here we are, this is Descartes, as we say, this is a user's manual to life, this book that we're exploring. And here he's given all of us a way out of being accused of doing something terrible. You basically say, look, I couldn't have done anything terrible because any mistake is just nothing.
Yeah.
Right? And how can you author nothingness? You can't. Nothing comes from nothing,
No.
right? So I made a mistake. The mistake is just nothing because, that bit of Lacan that Valentine believes exists just simply doesn't exist.
doesn't
It's
exist.
nothing, right?
Yeah.
And so God can't be the author of nothing because nothing is nothing.
No. But it does call it... Could we accuse Descartes of being the author of this nothing? It seems like he's just pulled a fast one and said, oh, yeah, there is this other innate idea, nothing, There's this kind of affirmation that we need this idea of nothing to be able to think existence, right? But as he says, like God can't be the author of this nothingness, therefore God can't be the author of my mistakes, Nothingness is on the side of error, God is on the side of truth, right?
It's an interesting kind of scale that's been set up that I think we've all talked about between the nothingness that is this innate sort of mistake that I find within myself, and then the infinity of God that I also find. So there's some sort of sliding scale between nothing and infinity. Do we ever hit that infinity when we try to create truth, when we try to do the right thing? Or are we always kind of on that scale somewhere? Like, are we always imperfect? Or can we just be right about things? I don't know.
You're going to find out later on, Catherine. I promise you, you can hit the infinite. It's like, when you're at the circus and you have to bang that bell with a hammer.
Yeah.
You can hit the bell right up the top. You can set it all the way up the top.
Get the
ring the
999.
jackpot.
Yep.
Exactly.
Get the 999s.
And you can hit infinity because you've got that willpower inside you, which is infinite. And it's on the loose, basically.
Yeah, but I mean, there is that question that we're going to get to later as well, but that we've already touched upon, with Descartes saying, as a finite being, I'm only ever potentiality. God is the only actuality in terms of being infinite. So it does seem like he's created this sliding scale that is eternally barred between the finite and the infinite, the potential and the actual. But, we're going to see if we can maybe traverse this famous bar that caused the philosophers of the 20th century so much trouble trying to get across.
So let's go back to the blame game, right? Because I like playing this game.
Yes.
So Descartes, he leaves nothingness alone for the moment, and he says, hang on. So I make mistakes. I participate in nothingness. God is the author of me. Why does he allow me to do this in the first place? He could have made me perfect.
Yeah.
It's like, Marlon Brando in On the Waterfront. He says, I
Yes.
could have been a contender.
I could have been a contender, yep.
That's Descartes now. He's saying, I could have been perfect.
I could have been someone.
Yeah, and then he runs through the two great classical responses to this. Why didn't God make me perfect?
Yeah.
And I love the first one, which is suck it up.
Yeah.
God's purposes are impenetrable. You'll never know.
Yeah, God is infinite. How dare you question the mighty designs of God's plan? Who are you as a finite being to question, the creator, the all-knowing perfect thing, You're just suffering with your finitude. But, I think also when I was reading this section, Spinoza's going to come along and take up this exact question, not that long after, where he goes, well, of course there can't be two perfect beings. You can't have two perfect substances, because if you have two things that are infinite in size, then you've got a problem. You can't have two infinities. So that's just a contradiction, and so you can't have that.
So there can be no rivalry in the cosmos.
There can only be one father, and everything else is finite.
This is Spinoza before set theory, right?
Yes.
Before the multiple infinities.
Yes.
But
Yes, Spinoza was very embarrassed by not having access to set theory, but, that was his kind of thing, right? You can't have two infinities. You can't have two infinite substances, otherwise they're not infinite, right? So this is one of the ways, I suppose, that Spinoza's going to try and respond to Descartes, but...
Well, the second traditional response that Descartes comes up with this question of, why didn't God make me perfect, is to simply respond, yeah, sure, maybe you're a little bit imperfect, but man, you got to look at the whole.
Yeah, man.
You got to look at the whole universe. Just wrap your arms around the whole universe.
He tried wrapping
That's
his arms
right.
around the mountain, and now he's
That's
trying to
right.
wrap his arms around the whole universe.
Because the whole is perfect. The whole is perfect, Catherine.
We got a tree hugger here. We got Descartes, trying to wrap his arms around everything he sees.
You got to accept a little bit of imperfection, even
Yeah.
if it's in you, because you're part of some wonderful mechanism that is just like cog meshing into cog.
Yeah.
Everything's working out. This is like Leibniz, before Leibniz got round to it. We live in the best of all possible universes.
Yeah.
Stop complaining.
Yeah.
Stop whinging.
Stop whinging, just accept that you're a partial moment in this greater whole, and, there are things that are beyond your understanding, but, once we get, we can get there, maybe together.
Yeah, but, Val, is Descartes somebody who, when you say stop and just accept things are beyond your understanding, is he going to say, oh, right, I'll just stop here?
He's like, oh, I guess I didn't think about that. That was not part of my method.
No, this is Descartes. He's going to go, he's not happy with these traditional responses,
No.
right? Because he is setting modern science on a foundation. He has great hopes for the progress of this science.
Yeah.
He just invented algebraic geometry and caused an enormous amount of pain to generations of school kids through the centuries.
And their parents, speaking of all this.
That's right. Yeah, we still don't have the result on my son's year 10 exams yet, on how he did in the maths yet.
But, yes, it is what it is, or it just be like that, is absolutely not an acceptable response for Descartes. He is not going to be having one bar of that, to use a phrase I found out was Australian, much to the confusion of a lot of my students. Not having a bar of it, it's source of much, much confusion.
So here we are, we're coming up to Descartes' great answer to the question of what is a mistake. Right, what actually happens?
Yeah.
And to set it up, he just starts out, and you guys can take it on from here. But he just says, "I've got two different faculties, right, in my mind that are at work when I make a mistake.
Yeah.
One of which is obviously the faculty of knowledge or the understanding, right, which is finite, it's limited, it's imperfect, it can always be improved, right?
Yeah.
And then he introduces this new faculty, which we haven't heard much about so far, but which has been at work."
Yeah.
Which is the faculty of choice or freedom of the will.
Freedom of the will. I mean, that's gonna cause a lot of kind of problems for thinking about the motivations for why we do anything. What is this will that seems to be going beyond us all the time? Like that's constantly going beyond, going further. That is not tied to just knowledge, right? It's got this kind of split going.
Yeah, I mean, this is one of the more interesting turns in this meditation, that my will is perfect, but my intellect is imperfect. And so the will is what attaches me to God. This is sort of the proof of God in me that goes beyond me as well, right? The infinite that I contain in this way. Yeah, I have a lot of thoughts on this, because it's a really interesting turn and grounds so much of our modern conception of freedom, that freedom is a capacity, that I could always be free. I just have to choose to be free. Now, this, I think, creates a lot of problems. Frank Ruda had a really great book out in 2024 called Indifference and Repetition, where he takes this assumption that freedom is a capacity to task. And I really do like this reading a lot, because what Frank argues is that if I could always be free, like let's say I'm in a bad job and I come home every day and I say, oh, I could leave whenever I want to. I'm free to leave. But if I never leave, am I really free? And this is the more sort of like Badiousian reading, right? That freedom is actually something eventual, right? That there needs to be some sort of break from the mundane and the everyday to be free. So that's very much contrary to what Descartes is putting down. And yet, the really eventual moment of freedom for Descartes is this affirmation, I am, from nothingness. That's something that is very radical, very much a stepping outside the bounds, let's say, like in a similar way with the job example and this like more like hardcore philosophy example. But that's, that's, perhaps just one way to look at how Descartes can demonstrate a certain type of freedom, but then also have this, very distinct definition of freedom, which I think we're mostly used to, right? This freedom as a capacity, right? That I always can be free. But I think we should take this critique seriously, though, as well.
Well, I think, Descartes does play a major role in shaping our understanding of what it means to be free in the modern era and what it means to have willpower. And you can definitely see him as one of the founders of a tradition of voluntarism in which the will is absolutely primary in determining our destiny. So we talked about, Val doing his affirmations in front of the mirror in the morning.
Yes.
That's a classic example. Like Val is a child of Descartes when he affirms his perfection in the mirror.
Yeah, well, it's one of the things I have to affirm because, if I'm following Descartes correctly, I am made in the likeness and image of God. So that is exactly the kind of thing that I should be affirming, right? That is exactly an example of, my will, an expression of my will moving towards God, right? It's this moment where he says, he says it in Meditation 4, where he says, it is above all in virtue of the will that I understand myself to bear in some way the image and likeness of God. So by affirming myself in the mirror, I'm just affirming God.
That's right.
That's all I'm here to do.
I have to be honest, when I was a kid and I heard this stuff about, humans being created in the image of God, I always thought that just meant we kind of looked like him. And then, there are all those images in children's illustrated versions of the Bible where there's some chap with a beard up in the sky with some clouds around him and a golden halo. And I thought, yeah, well, doesn't look much like me. I haven't got a beard yet.
Yeah.
But some human beings do have beards. So that's what. But here we have this thing that there's a thing of which we don't have an image, which is our will.
Yes.
And yet he says that's the image and likeness of God inside us. And, this is one of the great questions that he opens up, obviously, in Meditation 4. What is the will? And in a certain sense, the will is the infinite inside us, right? Because he says, in itself, it's not constrained, right? And he defines it. He says, what is the will? I quote, it's our ability to do or not do something. That is, to affirm or deny, to pursue or avoid, or rather it consists simply in the fact that when something is put forward for our consideration by the intellect, we are moved to affirm or deny it, to pursue or avoid it. So this is great. Like we've got choice, we've got willpower, we've got freedom, both in the field of knowledge, we affirm or deny something, and also in the field of activity, the field of action in everyday life, because we pursue or avoid things that appear to us to be good or bad. And let me just point out that in this definition, he's got the intellect playing the role of a servant. Val?
Oh, is this the return of the valet that has disappeared since the discourse? Since the discourse on the method.
That's right. It's the return of the valet, right? So the will is the master. The will is the master who says yes or no.
Yep.
Right? And the intellect is like this valet that comes up and says, Master, would you like to wear the purple trousers today?
Yes. It just reminded me of there's that famous story, speaking of valets and servants and masters, of do you know the story about Immanuel Kant? Bit of a coffee drinker.
Really? I
Have
thought
you
that was
heard this?
Balzac.
Oh, well, Balzac as well. But allegedly, Immanuel Kant was quite a consumer of a lot of coffee, to the point, allegedly, of drinking nearly 100 cups a day. And apparently what he would do when he ran out of coffee in his cup is he would cry out to his servant and say, I'm drowning. And that was the sign for the servant to bring him another cup of coffee. Yeah, so...
And then when the servant brought the coffee, he'd say, I see land.
Just an absolute...
He needed that caffeine hit.
Oh, yes. But yeah, so this is exactly, the will is it's functioning like the other thing that is infinite within us, right? It's like this is the thing that links us to God, right? This is, based on what the intellect presents us, the will is what... takes this up and goes, yes, no, maybe so.
And so it's because we're finite beings that our intellect is limited.
Yes.
That's the argument, right? That we have an access to the infinite in this way vis-a-vis God. But because I'm just little Descartes, right? I'm just this one little person in a big old universe. I don't have access to all of the knowledge, particularly all the knowledge of God's will and what he, has been doing. Yeah. And so therefore my acts are often limited in terms of my reason and my intellect.
Absolutely. He's brought the split in between the finite and the infinite, which formerly he dramatized as being between himself and God. He's now brought it inside himself because his knowledge is finite, but his will is infinite. And I think just to understand a little bit more about this will that he's introduced, let's go through some of the situations in which the will finds itself. Yeah. The first thing he points out, of course, and we can all assume this, the will is free. But what does this mean?
Yeah.
And I just want to call out to a fictional character that is actually part of the lunar universe, and that is Ernie the donkey.
Yes.
Because donkeys find themselves in a very important and famous position when it comes to the dramas of the will.
Yes.
Buridan's donkey, right?
Yes.
Buridan. So unlike Ernie, who always knows what he wants, right? Buridan's donkey didn't know what he wanted. There he was. He was stuck. He was chained, Catherine. Some unfair, terrible master had chained his legs to the stable floor. And in front of him, within reach, mind you, he wasn't chained too far away from the bales of hay, but within reach were two perfectly identical bales of hay.
Yes.
Fresh, juicy hay.
Yep.
And my God, was Buridan's donkey hungry. He hadn't eaten for days. He needed to eat. But should he go left or should he go right?
How could
Which way does he go, Val? He's still
Yeah.
hungry. Make a decision for him.
He can't.
He can't.
He goes nowhere.
Exactly. And Descartes says, you know, having free will and like not knowing which way to go, that is the lowest and most degraded and base and foolish and imperfect forms of freedom you can have.
I think this is such a good example because it's just like when you go to the grocery store and you're trying to pick a potato, you know? Yeah, these two potatoes look exactly alike. This is the worst example of freedom you could conjure up, right? Like, oh, my choice between two potatoes. And so, yeah, I mean, that just underscores that indifference does not lead us to freedom, right? That we need to actually make like a really strong, like differential, like act in order to be free. I think the donkey is such a good example.
Yeah, and I suppose there's also the other example, you know, it's the kind of dizzying heights of freedom when you're confronted with too many options, too many choices. You know, if we're going to stay in the grocery store, if anyone's been to Paris, you know, how enormous is the selection and range of like cereal? Or the other thing that the French are incredibly famous for is potato chips or crisps. I think the English, you who are
Crisps. Crisp, Val.
Englishly inclined, crisp. No, well, as the Australian ambassador, you know, I have to say everything's chips. There's just various states of extension of chip.
Yeah, this is a great, I mean, often commented upon observation of like the capitalist supermarket, right? That we have, 500 brands of chocolate, right? Two choices for president in the US at least, right? But is that really freedom to have, 500 different brands of chocolate to choose from?
But is it also really freedom to extend it where it's like, yeah, there may be 500 different brands, but they're all owned by the same two conglomerates, right? But there's also, there's I like that Descartes calls this the lowest degree of freedom as well, where it's like you're confronted by these choices, but what often happens is you get decision paralysis, right? You end up making a non-choice, and you just go, right, no, I'm just going to starve to death here, right?
Well, so, Catherine and Val, you're both stuck in the supermarket. Would you like Descartes to save you in this situation?
Oh, I would love
Please.
that, please.
He says, all you need is a reason of truth and goodness, right?
Oh.
Or a divine disposition of your thoughts, and that will increase your freedom because you will be inclined in one direction or another.
Right.
So you don't like the 500 brands of cereal,
Yeah.
Val? Make your own cereal. You're free.
I'm
Get
free.
some oats and roll them.
Yeah. Well, we were just talking about this. There's a big trend on Instagram at the moment of these kind of, I don't want to call them trad wives, but these women who make these Instagram reels, and they'll be like, I'm making my cereal from scratch, and will go grow the oats, grow the wheat, grow and make their own cocoa. Like, it's this incredibly long, drawn out, painful kind of process, and obviously it's all condensed into the size of 15 seconds for Instagram. But there's this kind of, this is them being the real Cartesians. They went, okay, I can just go out and make this myself. I don't have to decide between what's presented before me. I'm going to go out and make everything from scratch. It'll take me months and months, but that is a real exercise of will.
Yeah, I suppose it's, such a fantasy, right? That we actually can have time to make our food in this economy we live in. But yeah, I mean, to Oliver's point, right, on, to do the right thing with the willpower you have, ought to have some sort of connection to the divine, to truth. I don't know if the trad wives are connecting to some sort of divine or some truth when it's just a marketing gimmick. But, sort of grifting in that way, right? Like, oh, there is some truth here, which is a beautiful fantasy of actually being able to like make your own food products. Again, like, is that realistic? I don't know, but yeah, to get out of the grocery store, we're still in the grocery,
Yeah,
kind of
no.
out
We're still
of, we're on
stuck
the
there,
farm a little bit now, but yeah, that access to truth is such an interesting aspect here, right? Can we tap into the divine in our choices?
Yeah, and that's that's one of the questions that Descartes asks. He says, "Look, why am I in this situation of a disconnect between my will and my knowledge? I don't know enough about all these different products. I don't know what kind of trace elements they've got in, what traces of pesticides they've got in them. I don't know, what kind of exploited labor was used in producing these particular raw materials that went into the cereal boxes, this kind of thing." So he says, look, God made me. If I always saw what was clearly true in God's, and here I'm quoting Rene, right?
Yeah.
I should never have to deliberate about the right judgment or choice because I make it, right? I just make it in me. So God could have made me such that my will and my knowledge were perfectly matched up, and I knew everything about every single type of cereal, right? And I knew exactly the right cereal. Given my propensity to acid reflux in the morning, I'm not going to have granola,
Yes,
right?
okay.
Can't handle that sugar load, right? I'm going to have like the rawest possible oat I can possibly get.
Yeah,
and
maybe
it's going to
some
be rye or
maybe
something.
some wheat bix or some Vitabrits.
No, barley
Oh,
flour. That's
oh,
all I can
that's-
have.
oh.
Yeah, and then or spelt, even better. They've got spelt in
Oh,
France.
okay,
Yeah.
cool.
In this situation, he says, I know absolutely everything, right? So I don't have this dilemma of choice. I can get out of the grocery store. And he says, in this situation, I would be wholly free, right? I'm never in a state of indifference because I know exactly what to do. I know everything. But this is weird because, and this is why I think Descartes is so fantastic, ushering in the modern era. Because not only does he like put free will, right in the center of the stage, but he also immediately hits all of the paradoxes of freedom.
Yeah.
Because here he talks about having perfect knowledge and he says you're still free. But my question is, how can you be free if you know exactly what to do? And it was never, ever a question of you doing anything other than exactly the right thing.
Because it does seem in that regard that are you really free if the argument has been set out before you already? Like, where's the choice? Almost, right? Like, I feel like you do need not a choice of indifference, but some sort of choice to be free, right?
Yeah, he sounds like he's programmed.
Yeah, exactly.
It's like the AI. The AI says, look, you program me. I'm not choosing this.
Completely.
You program me to scrape all this data and use algorithms. It's not my fault if you don't like the results. Stop programming me like this.
Yeah, for the AI, it's just going to auto-complete a sentence and say this is the best possible choice of what comes next. That's not freedom in any sense, right? That's just statistical operation. And so, yeah, one I think wants to avoid thinking in that way with freedom, right? That we just sort of statistically gamble like, oh, the best choice in this situation for me is to create this outcome. And of course, we know that's not how humans think, right? And yeah, even when reading this section, I was kind of caught between thinking about, making a mistake in terms of just like a calculation mistake, right? Like how big a football field is, right? How many brands of cereal are there in the grocery store, right? Or making, an ethical mistake, right? That's a much bigger question that I think has the link to the divine or to the infinite or to truth in this way, right? But yeah, that just sort of struck me that maybe we're talking about different types of errors as well.
Well, one way in which Descartes clears this up for us, these paradoxes of freedom, is that he has this very large range of freedom that he admits. So in all these situations, your Buridan's donkey, your Val in the grocery store, not knowing which brand of cereal to buy, or you're somebody who knows, or you're Catherine who knows everything about all forms of cereal and knows exactly what cereal to buy. You're all free in all of those three situations, because the only situation in which you're not free, Val, is when somebody's holding a gun to your head and saying, buy the Kellogg's.
Yeah, so this is the external world really imposing itself upon my ability to choose, right? It's like gun to my head, you're buying that one, right? You're being forced into this apparent choice, and, I've got the external world coming in and telling me that I have to make this choice in particular.
Yeah, and you know that you've got an external force compelling you.
Yeah.
right? You're fully conscious of it, which is, I mean, it's kind of interesting because Spinoza's going to investigate situations in which we think that we're free, but actually there are external forces influencing us, like very influential advertising campaigns,
Yes.
right? And I remember hearing very recently that somebody became an expert on the use of sound in advertising, and he was very, very confused when Kellogg's, who made rice bubbles, came along to him and said, yeah, we need to use some sound in our advertising to sell more cereal. And he said, are you crazy? You guys invented the use of sound in advertising.
Yeah.
What is it? Snap, bubble, and pop? Or whatever?
Snap, crackle, pop?
Snap, crackle, pop.
Yes.
That's
yeah,
right. That's the use. So it's that sound, it's also the sound of the Coke can when you open it up, that kind of hiss of gas escaping, right? It's also, I mean, nobody invented this, but it's a lovely gurgle of red wine, of Bordeaux wine as you open the,
Yes,
you
as you
pull the
put-
cork. We still have corks in France, by the
Yes.
way.
Not just the
The
screw
top,
caps.
yeah. So here we are. He said, you're free in all these kinds of situations, and the only situation in which you're not free with your will is when you have an explicit external force compelling you to make a so-called choice, right?
Do you guys think that's true? Like, I mean, like, do you agree with Descartes in this way?
Oh no, I've got an unconscious.
Yeah,
I can tell you, Catherine, I've got an unconscious. I've met it,
Just
and I'm
because
not aware of it.
just thinking about the world we live in, and again, we think we're so free, right? But to really make those radical choices, right? To go on strike, for example, right? That, if I'm just using like a statistical analysis, most likely won't lead to any gains in the workplace. Most likely I'm going to lose my job and my livelihood. I got a mortgage, I got a family, et cetera, right? Those are crazy risks that perhaps are like moments of freedom for us. But I think that we're taught that that's not freedom as well.
I think there's a way of internalizing certain forms of compulsion whereby you make decisions knowingly in which you assume certain risks to your livelihood, risks to your reputation, and then you internalize them and you symbolize them. And, this is where I would actually go to this philosopher that most of us have spent a lot of time on, Hegel and Badiou, and say that when you develop a kind of faithfulness to some kind of event in your life, whether that event happens in the world of love or politics or science or art, then you are creating a symbolic framework in which you make sense of the consequences of that event in your life, and you assume the risks, right?
And I felt like when just in our conversation just now that we could kind of link Badiou and Descartes here insofar as, for Descartes, the will, ought to link to a truth in this way, like a divine truth for Descartes, right? But for Badiou, right, we would say, no, I'm like, doing the right thing, let's say, like in an ethical sense, when I, pay homage to that truth, when I, follow the truth event out with different fidelitous acts, right? So perhaps there's some friendship bracelet we can weave between the two.
Oh, absolutely. Yeah. No, for me, like, Badiou absolutely needs his concept of the subject. It actually sources it in Descartes. But what he's doing up here is he's actually, at this stage, we've got to the stage, finally, this is the exciting bit, Val.
This is the exciting bit, yes.
Where he's come to his answer to the big question, what is a mistake?
Yeah. Well, I mean, what is the mistake? So is this the moment where he says the error occurs when my will, whose scope is wider than that of the intellect, is not restricted by me within the limits of my intellect, right? I extend its use to matters which I do not understand, right?
Yeah. In other words, you say yes before you're ready.
Yeah. You take, it's a leap of faith or argument almost, it's a very almost like proto-Kierkegaardian moment, right? You just go, you say yes.
It's basically, yes. So when you're making a mistake, it's when your will overshoots your understanding.
Yeah.
Right? It's like your will is like Achilles and your understanding is like a poor tortoise or a rabbit or I don't know what, or a donkey that's been chained to the bottom of a stable, right? And your will's right out in front, racing ahead, going, yes, it's all good. And maybe it's denying, saying, no, that's rubbish. And your understanding saying, hang on, excuse me.
Oh, wait, no.
Yeah.
That's
But
not in accordance.
the will's ignoring the intellect completely. So here you are, you've got this infinite thing inside you, right? That wants to affirm, or deny, and you're ignoring your understanding.
Yeah, you're not acting according to the knowledge that is available to you. The will is far exceeding what you're capable of understanding, or what you understand at this given point, right? And that's where the error emerges when, you act beyond what you know.
You're too big for your britches.
Yeah.
So what should we do with the will, Val? Like, how are we going to get it under control?
I feel like we're going to have to tame it a little bit. It feels like it's a bit of an unruly horse, and we're going to have to rein it in somehow.
We'll get that bridle on it.
Can we get that bridle on it? And this, of course, is going to have to be, through some use of reason, or find some way to restrain the will. How could we do that?
Well, the funny thing is he says that, my will is such that it's infinite, it's pushing, it's shoving, it's urging itself in all kinds of directions. It's the incorrect use of the free will that results in error, right? That is, if I let my will loose
Right.
and don't pay attention to the fact that I don't have clear and distinct ideas of the things around me, of the good things that I think I should pursue, of the bad things that I think I should avoid. If I have inadequate knowledge, at that moment, I should suspend my judgment and slow down. I mean, I think one of Descartes' great messages to all of us, and I think it's one that we can all listen to, is slow down, right?
Take your
Hold
time.
your horses.
Take your time. Work out what ideas you can actually act upon. Don't go rushing off. Don't go rushing off in all different directions at all different moments.
Don't be a busy bee.
Don't be a busy bee. And that is a very positive message for this world of just ever increasing. The hyper dissimulation of information, knowledge, the increase in productivity that we're expected to do as laborers. Just slow down for a second. We need to get that unruly will under control, otherwise it can be harvested for nefarious purposes.
That reminds me, Val, I once slowed down,
One time?
Yeah, once. It was actually in the last year of my undergraduate degree, and I was writing this thesis, the honours thesis, and I thought to myself, I think I'm just going to lie in my bed and look out the window.
Lovely.
And do you know what I saw?
A bunch of hats going by your door?
No, I saw. It was winter in Sydney, and because at Sydney it was like bright blue sky, and so I just saw the outlines of these twigs and branches of a tree just outside my bedroom window, just like fluttering and moving slightly in the wind and framing the sky in different ways. And the sun was actually shining in through these twigs and casting beautiful shadows, Catherine, on my wall. And I thought, I'm just going to look at these shadows.
Yeah.
Beautiful.
Well, you're back in Plato's cave. You went ahead to look outside and you said, I've attained this truth and now I'm going to go back into the cave and look at the shadows. And
That's
I mean,
right.
I also had a moment of slowing down last year. Perhaps the most awful time to do that. Towards the end of my PhD, I was often chastised by some of my other colleagues and other PhD candidates, and they said, you're not working very hard, or you're not working as much as I did when I was finishing my PhD. I was putting in 14-hour, 16-hour days. You're coming in for 8, 9, and then you're going home. And I went, yeah, I've got friends to see, want to go to dinner, want to catch a movie. I'm taking it slow. And they go, what? That's insane. Like, how are you going to get this done? And I said, if I push myself beyond if I let my will exceed itself and I push myself beyond, I know once I start writing past 8 hours, already 8 hours is too much to be just sitting on one thing, but all the writing I do in excess of 8 hours, it's rubbish. And I have to come back the next day and I have to waste all this time correcting all the rubbish that I wrote. So I'd rather just limit myself there and go off and enjoy my life. So.
You both are better than me. As soon as I institute some sort of limitation, I have the desire to transgress it. Unfortunately, I read too much psychoanalysis and now I think I'm just emulating it. But yeah, I don't know how to tame the infinity of my will, let alone my desire either.
So when you set yourself your own limit to how much work you're going to do, then you transgress that limit.
I think so. I think I'm just too much of a hysteric, to really play by these sort of self-imposed rules in so many ways. I don't think I'd do well with Descartes and limiting my will to align with my intellect.
Well, there you go. I mean, there you go, listeners. There's an example of a will that could not be greater. Like that kind of work ethic is just amazing.
Yes.
So here we are He's finally come up with an answer to the question, what is a mistake? What is a mistake? It's when my will overshoots my understanding. And at this moment, he falls back into the blame game. He says, well, hang on, God is the author of my being.
Yeah.
It's not my fault that my will overshoots my understanding.
He should have made me better. Yeah.
He should have given me, he could have given me an infinite understanding in the first place.
Yeah.
He's the author of my being.
Yeah.
And he says, well, and all the way through this, when he's playing the blame game, he keeps on trying to save God and say, look, it's not really God's fault. But he's whinging at the same time. He's going backwards and forwards. And he says, look, the will in itself, in me, is infinite. Therefore, it's perfect. Therefore, in itself, it's not making mistakes. My limited faculty of understanding is not the cause of my mistakes, because when I do understand things correctly, God is actually authoring such understanding, right? And God is the author of my faculty of understanding.
Yes.
So I ought to be grateful if I understand anything at all. Thanks very much.
Yes.
Right. At that point, he says, "Yeah, sure, fine. Okay, so when I do make mistakes, it's because it's not my will, it's not my knowledge, but it's when they're mismatched. It's when I'd let my will go straight past, right, and overtake in the overtaking lane, right? And at that point, he says, well, hang on, why didn't God give me some instructions?
Yeah.
When I was born into this world, he put innate ideas into me.
Yeah.
We know that God leaves his signature in my mind. It's the idea of God, right?
Yeah. He's the craftsman. He should have given me an instruction manual. It's like, it'd be like if you order something from IKEA and they just give you all the bits and you don't know what to do with it. There's a screwdriver missing. I don't know which part's supposed to go where. There's all these pegs.
Where's the hex key? Where's the
hex
hex key?
key? There's always the famous missing part from any IKEA order. It's like there's a problem of assembly.
Yeah, so what does Descartes do? He comes along and he says, look, I'm really sorry. You didn't get an instruction manual. But guess what? Here it is.
Yeah.
Read my books.
Yes.
Read my books.
God may not have left you an instruction manual, but I certainly did.
That's right. So when you don't understand something, when you feel like you're going too fast, just slow down.
And read Discourse on the Method and Meditations on First Philosophy.
Wait till you get those clear and distinct ideas.
And it'll all be fine.
That's right. Everything has to be in order. Your lists have to be complete.
Yes. So I think that about wraps it up for this week's episode. I want to thank Katherine Everitt so much for joining us and being such a thoughtful interlocutor.
Thank you both. This was so fun.
You're welcome. It was great to have you on board.
Yeah, and I suppose that's just us signing out. So for this week, see you later.
Tune in next episode to discover just how Descartes does repopulate the universe with all those other things.
Oh yeah, I forgot, after all of these conversations, I still don't have the external world. All I got is me being and nothing.
Yeah, and a huge argument with God about who's to blame.
All right, see you all next week.
Goodbye.